And welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show. My man Joshua Perry sitting here. We've been diving into Ohio State spring ball. You know, they had spring break a couple weeks ago. They're back. They had a couple practices under their belts this last week, Tuesday, Thursday. Big Student Appreciation Day, which Urban Meyer started. And I don't know, Joshua, probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago now. You were there for that, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So we'll get into a little bit of that, but they had that this Saturday. Catch up everything there, some of the issues that the Buckeyes are going to be working with. We're going to have our tailgate talk question from the listeners, which we always kind of dive into. And that's our favorite segment each and every week. It's a little bit unique. You know, they had practice on Saturday, Easter on Sunday. And now, Joshua, they're going to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week. So they're going to be able to give the guys a weekend off before they get ultimately into their final week. For these last 2 weeks of spring, when you look at it, and like, how does that differ in your mind from maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks of spring ball?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple weeks is really a lot of fundamental work. It's a lot of install. You're trying to get guys back in the mode of playing football, introduce some of the new players, whether that's early enrollees or transfer players, to what the scheme is like, what the expectation at practice is like, how things are done. And once you get to this point, it's really about trying to, see if you can separate and make some differentiations on what you think the final depth chart might be leaving the spring. And so a lot of the install is done. You're trying to get some competitive reps here. Today is an example, I guess, the day that we're recording this, a student appreciation practice where you're trying to get some good on good reps, and you want to do it in front of people, see who rises up to the challenge and can perform under pressure. And so I think this is where it ratchets up. And I think that some guys could make or break, how they feel about their summer offseason, ultimately the start of training camp based off of what they do to finish off spring ball.
So, some of the big battles that we've talked about, and I think that there's, probably two big questions coming into this spring. Number one, what's the quarterback room going to look like? A lot of players in there, a lot of talent, some young, some old. And then what's the right side of that offensive line going to look like? And you feel pretty good about the left with where that's going to sit. You got McLaughlin in there at center. I think that he's making strides and he's, assimilating fairly well. But the right side, they're trying to figure that out. And that's one of the things that, we can start with here because, they've got Fryer, they've got Luke Montgomery. Both those guys, I think, have played some guard and some tackle. Obviously, Fryer played tackle last year. Tegra Shabola, who came in, really didn't play last year, needed a year of physical development. He's been working a little bit at tackle. Enoch Vamahi's been playing some guard. Like, they've been working on these combinations over there of just trying to figure out who the best two guys are going to be. And it's a real challenge because I think there's times where the guys have been good. There's times where they've struggled. And they're going against really good defensive line. I've been thoroughly impressed, with obviously JT and Jack, but even how well, Kenyatta Jackson is playing, Caden Curry, Mitchell Melton. Like, these guys have all looked really, really good. And subsequently, because of that, it's been a struggle over there on the right. And so do you think that needs to be locked up by the end of spring, or are you comfortable still working through some of that during training camp?
No, I don't think it needs to be locked up, but I think you need to have a pretty good idea of what the pecking order is going to be in terms of reps when you head into training camp. I don't think that there can be a situation where you're, 50-50 on a lot of these reps for a majority of training camp, because then ultimately whoever becomes the starter at either one of those positions is going to be a little bit behind the curve in terms of rep count and competitive reps and their ability to develop. So hopefully there's some separation there and somebody really steps up. I don't think this is a situation where you need to be 100% confident in what that lineup's going to be there. And ultimately, summer's a great time for a lot of development too, because one of the things that I know these guys do, some of the things that we did a lot of drill work during the summer. Winter conditioning, a lot of it is trying to get strong. You're doing some competitive drills out there on the field, conditioning wise, but it's not a lot of football technical drill work. Summer, I mean, if you're not drilling during the summer, you're definitely falling behind. If you are, you're getting an advantage. So hopefully these guys can continue to develop that way.
How do you balance And the thing that's interesting about offensive line, it's the biggest position group. Obviously, you're going to have five guys starting, balancing getting those best five. You may have someone that's good at tackle, but if you have to play them at guard, or maybe you're playing your guard at tackle, and that's why I think Fryer is going to be a guy that plays. It's just a function of, are they better with him at guard and someone else at tackle, or are they better with him at tackle and someone else with guard? And that cohesion element, Joshua, that is the one thing. Like, I know you said they get a lot of the drill work, but that cohesion with the offensive lineman and the guy you're working beside to be able to pass off those stunts and blitzes, the evaluation process on that. I mean, do you almost try to evaluate this in terms of like pairs of guys of who's playing well together, or do you try to look at it as an isolated thing, best guard, best tackle, or best tackle, best guard, however that looks?
I think if it's pretty clear cut on if somebody is best at a position, you probably could roll that way. But if there is a question, I think you start to say, okay, what combination of these guys, what pairing of guys gives us the best opportunity? Who works well together? And I think that's a pretty good approach there because, and I mean, we've seen plenty of examples where individually, a player might not be a superstar, but when you put them beside the right people, all of a sudden the group starts to look really good. We experienced some of that when I was at Ohio State, especially on the offensive line. Even linebacker at times, if you got the right guy in the middle and you know that he's flanked by two dudes that can cover up mistakes at times, you feel pretty solid about what you're doing. So individually, if there's somebody that just really stands out and you got to put them at a certain position, I think that's where you rock. If you don't get to that point of separation, you start to evaluate, okay, can the combination really rise to a level where these guys play well?
Yeah, it's been interesting because there's talking, looking, trying to figure it out. I haven't really got a sense of kind of how this is going to shake out yet. And it's been fun because they started putting on the pads. And the one thing as you get into this in the spring is now you're starting to see some of these elements of run game, and they were doing some unique situations we'll get into today, Student Appreciation Day, with the coming out situation. You're backed up on your own 2 or 3 yard line. What does that look like? Short down, short yardage on your third and fourth downs, trying to convert that and leaning in on the run game a little more. I think in the run game, they've been a lot better, but everybody always looks at the pass and how they're ultimately going to be able to shore that up. Well, coming up, we're going to take you inside of practice a little bit, maybe some of the quarterback battles, where that is. And there's one guy that's been absolutely killing it out there. And I don't know how you'll be able to keep him off the field. We'll get into all that here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Oh, welcome back into the program. And we had Easter on Sunday this week. Guys are kind of rolling along. Your favorite Easter traditions, Joshua? I mean, I feel like usually you got that whole weekend off. This year, I feel like it obviously hit a little bit earlier. So it was tough as far as practice schedule. It's usually at least a week before the spring game. But some of your favorite stuff that you maybe celebrated, how that all worked when you were playing.
Yeah, we would being a local guy, I would try to get some guys to come up to my parents' house for a nice Easter meal. We'd have my mother, the wonderful Georgette, in the kitchen cooking up something fantastic, and that was always a great time to bond. I think really make guys feel at home too. I think about like Raekwon McMillan, for example, who's a guy who came from the state of Georgia. And he's out here and he's like, yeah, I haven't had that taste of a good home cooked meal in a little while. So you make them feel good doing that. Those are the best memories from college. My mom is a little bit over the top. So we probably did Easter egg hunts a little bit too long. But as we got older, the prizes got better. It used to be a little bit of cash in the Easter eggs there, which I liked.
Oh,
Always enjoyed coloring eggs too. And I like eating boiled eggs to begin with. So it
so you're
wasn't so much
you are
the
you are
coloring, it
a
was
hard-boiled egg guy.
yeah, I am. So it wasn't so much the coloring of the eggs, it was the fact that I was trying to slam some hard-boiled eggs.
When did you start liking hard-boiled eggs? This is interesting.
Uh well, probably like, 5 years old. Like I was a kid
Really?
eating them, yes.
See, I used to love to color the eggs, but we color them all, and then I hated eating hard-boiled eggs. I didn't like they just didn't look appealing to me, and I really wasn't a huge egg guy until my dad was like, "Listen, if you want to gain weight and be a dude, like time to start eating eggs." So I would like choke them down in middle school, and now I eat a ton of eggs all the time. And I mean, the hard boiled egg is really a great snack. You a little salt, you get a little pepper on there.
Yep.
They're easy. You put them together. And so now I'm a big fan of it. I didn't anticipate that, Joshua. I know that your distaste for, the bovine lactose. So you're not really a fan of the cow milk. I felt like for some reason, like the hard boiled egg was going to maybe go in the same realm of that.
No, I'll slam the hard boiled eggs. I am not a fan of the cow's milk. Although Bobby, new development, I am coming around a little bit. I've gotten on the Fairlife ultra filtered milk because the protein content there is really good, and I get to save on calories compared to a rice milk or an oat milk or soy milk, thing of that nature. So yeah, we were slamming hard boiled eggs from childhood, salt, pepper, maybe a little bit of hot sauce if you're feeling
Yeah,
spicy. It's really good.
it's fantastic. Dude, Raekwon, I mean, here's the thing with Raekwon going to your house. I mean, Raekwon he had like a full 18.5-inch neck when he showed up on campus with a nice box jaw to match. He was a grown man before
He
that was
looked like a
even a thing.
linebacker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like Raekwon looked like a dude that was a linebacker and probably going to be like a drill instructor later in the military. Like he just has that like firm set about him
Yeah.
where it just like it exudes authority. Like there's something about him and he doesn't talk all that much. He's a quiet guy and a very nice dude, but just
Hmm.
if you don't know him, I'd say you're very intimidated by him. Like I know Georgette probably leaned on him early, like warming him up.
Oh yeah, no, and I mean like he is a really sweet guy, and so it was like super cool. And we'd have a bunch of guys over, but like Raekwon sitting up there and we're chit chatting, we're having fun, joking around. And then here comes the ham and the cornbread and the collard greens, and my man is feeling like he's back in Georgia just for an afternoon. So it was phenomenal.
That's good. That's good, man. Bulk him up. Not really. I mean, he was a thick dude
No,
his whole
he
life and
he didn't
always
need
going.
any bulking
No,
up.
you were
Yeah,
the one that needed the ball. I mean, Raekwon
yeah,
showed up like 225, 230, about ready to play from day
yeah.
one. And that's why he played as a freshman, just his physical stature. And it's a good, we'll go there. Nice segue. Guys playing as freshmen and veteran guys. And usually, and Jim Trust would always say this, like, always give preference to the older players. He goes, but once it gets to be even, it's like then I'm going to start leaning on the young guys. And so I think so far in spring ball, Ryan's done a great job, Dave, of moving the reps around for the quarterbacks. They've been working with a ton of receivers. They're all getting different reps in every practice. I've been trying to track like who's with this group, who's with that group, who are they with, the D line, are they going against the one defense, the three defense, however that looks. No one's really kind of separated yet. And it's good and bad. I mean, no one's playing poorly, but no one is really taking that jump. And I think that's kind of what happened last year. We have Devin Brown, you got Will Howard that are older. Will Howard played a lot of ball. Lincoln Keenholt's kind of in the middle, and you got Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin, two freshmen coming in. Where do you come down on, let's say one of the freshmen or young guys is still there, and it's maybe a two-horse race. This team, you feel like at just about every position, from what I've seen, it is a national championship caliber team. Do you still err on the side of the young guy, or do you go with a guy in Will Howard who you've watched win a Big 12 championship and get it done at big time moments?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And to your point about kind of how nobody separated like last year, I just hope that an injury does not factor into how this race plays out. I want everybody to be 100% fighting through training camp. But to answer the question you're really talking about, I think if it's close at the beginning of the year, you do kind of go in with the veteran guy, and you do that with the idea that as soon as you feel like the game is comfortable, you're putting the young dude in there and you're getting him valuable game reps. And then that moment where you feel like it's got to be almost I have a sense about this. I have a feeling about this. It's not a cerebral thing. It's more of an emotional, gut feeling type thing. But the moment you feel like it's time for that young guy to go, put him in there and don't look back. And the thing that you can't get into is, regardless of what the situation is, if you roll with the older guy and you feel like he's your guy, or if you feel like it's time to put the young guy in, don't flip flop. You cannot flip flop, because I feel like that causes more issues than just making a decision. And it's probably, if you're rolling with the young guy, it's probably going to get a little bit rough at times. I think that's where you have to rely on the run game. You got a stacked running back room, so that's a bonus. You have to rely on the fact that you got guys on the outside who can cover up mistakes because you got a really good wide receiver room, and you work through those problems. But to your point, everything else is really good. You can lean on a great defense. You can lean on some of the other position groups. And frankly, I'm looking at a team, and I know people are going to hate this comparison. I'm looking at a team in Michigan who won a national title game, and the quarterback only completed 10 passes in that game, right? Like, there's a way to get this thing done without having to put it on the arm of the quarterback every single time the game gets tough. And you might have to figure that out for this year.
And maybe sometimes it's the legs of the quarterback. And that's, I think, the tough thing is there is with Will Howard and Devin Brown too. But Will Howard's a big physical guy. You being from that Urban Meyer school of thought, like on a 3rd and 3, Q power in the worst thing in the world when you have a 235, 240-pound quarterback, like it keeps the chains moving. Is Will Howard maybe as gifted a thrower that you're going to find as like a CJ Stroud or maybe one of the young guys? No, but I think there's some gamesmanship and the ability to play well. And so that's what's going to be tough. And Ryan trying to balance this of knowing, well, do I go with the upside and hopefully that upside develops, or is the gamesmanship and the experience, is this kind of enough to catapult it through? And that's
Yeah,
we'll
but
be talking.
to the upside thing real quick, and don't mean to cut you off, but like you talk about development, like that's you as a coach. Like how confident do you feel in your ability to get a guy ready? And I know everybody kind of goes at different paces, and so you have to be an evaluator when it comes to that. But if you feel like you're that dude who can get somebody ready, then I mean you're looking at the young guy just as much as you're looking at the older guy.
Absolutely. Well, and we'll talk a little about that because also maybe kind of depends on what type of team you have. You got a stacked running back room. I've enjoyed seeing some of the stuff that they've been doing with Chip Kelly. So we'll get into, Student Appreciation Day and the guy that's been turning heads and setting the world on fire. And I don't think you'll be able to keep him off the field. You'll see who that is here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, welcome back into the program and Student Appreciation Day. And we talked a little bit earlier in the program, Joshua. You've got a chance to play during it. I've been at a bunch of them. They don't necessarily have the races anymore. I was waiting to see the fastest Buckeye, maybe Kerry Combs, would come out and run. I mean, you got to think they've got James Laurinaitis, Brian Hartline. You got some former players out there. Let those guys hop in. But there's one guy that people have kind of seen stuff from the practices when the media has been able to watch a little bit. But then ultimately you get a chance with Student Appreciation Day and everybody's in there and you see it. And you see a guy in Jeremiah Smith, they call him JJ. We're number 4 for the offense. He's about 6'4", 220. This receiver room for Ohio State, as you know, Joshua, is very good. You've got a Mecca Ibuka coming back. Carnell Tate, I think people thought it's kind of the heir apparent to Marvin. And then outside of that, it's like, well, you've got Brandon Innes. You've got, a lot of talented younger guys who have been playing well. And I've never been a fan of like throwing a freshman out there early and expecting them to go dominate. But watching Jeremiah Smith and what he's able to do, I text your guy Tyvis about this. He was talking about it on the radio and they're watching clips. And I'm like, imagine Michael Thomas running like a 4.3, 4.4 his senior year, but that's him as a freshman. And I've never seen anybody who has all the physical gifts and ability that he has that's also like pretty polished in a lot of his routes, but as competitive as you're going to find.
Listen, I saw a clip, and I don't want to, make it sound like I'm dumping on one guy to prop up another guy, but Denzel Burke has the opportunity to be one of the best corners in the country this year. I think he's already in that conversation. And I saw Jeremiah go up top on him. And I was like, geez, oh, Pete. And it's uncommon to see guys come in and play like that. But you mentioned the physical statures. The first thing that I noticed when I'm watching these clips, I'm like, okay, well, let's see if the guy can actually go out there and make some plays. And time again, he is making plays. So it's not just like you see the flash, but you're starting to see some consistency with his game, which is something that young players don't have. I think this is a phenomenal opportunity for Ohio State as a program because you get a kid out of South Florida who's one of the top guys. You know, we talked about the recruiting rankings the last time, but one of the top guys who's playing like one of the top guys, and you're probably going to play him a lot in his freshman year. And you can use that as a tool on the recruiting trail to be like, hey, we bring in top dudes and we let them play if they're ready to go. So if you feel like you can compete and you can play right now, come here because we'll give you the opportunity to do it. I think this whole thing sets up not only on the field to impact games, but now you're starting to talk about can you get even more momentum for a program that's already recruiting really well.
Oh, and you start talking about, like you said, Denzel Burke and how talented he is. And he's doing this against a good secondary. Davidson Igbenusson, really good, tall, lean, athletic guy, runs well. Like,
Aggressive.
yes, aggressive. He's got a lot of dog in him. They're going like back and forth, battling. Jermaine Matthews, one of the best freshman corners in the country. Like, he's got a lot of dog in him. Like, these guys aren't taking, they're not just handing the reins to him. They're battling back and forth. And the thing is, Joshua, it's kind of it's a misnomer when you look at maybe production and practice because the balls from the quarterbacks haven't always been very well thrown. They've either been underthrown or when it should be a back shoulder, it's not, or maybe they're not as crisp as you would have liked. And he's still able to go out there and do it. And so I've loved to see that developing and battling him. And now, like, all of the student body got to see it. So the players have always seen it, the students that were there. And so he's going to get on the field because everybody knows he should get on the field because they see the worth in that. It'll be a challenge for Brian Hartline to try to find a way to work everybody in and to make sure that you're rewarding guys who deserve to be out there, who have proved their worth to be out there, because he's one of the guys. I think it's him at Egmeka, and then Carnell Tate was always that other guy to me, but I think there's going to be some rotations with this because there's other guys that they're going to want to get on the field ultimately as well. And it was all the better because of in the environment of Student Appreciation Day. And you've been out there. And so to paint the picture, it's not a great, sometimes you've had it outside. The weather on Student Appreciation Day was rainy and cold early on Saturday. So it was
Well, take them
indoor.
outside.
Yeah, well, they could have. And then they could have had your boy Dave Perkins hit Brutus again. But we're not, we weren't going to do that.
Where in the world is Dave Perkins right now?
Where in the world is the guy that played Brutus? Are we sure that he's still alive or he didn't get CT and die after that? Because Dave Perkins, he was fully padded and hit this man running.
Can we
Perkins was
talk about this
fast.
real quick? Can we talk about this real quick? So, I mean, like, I'm out there. Like, this is one of the teams that I played on. And, like, most of us had common sense. And so they're like, hey, we're going to put Brutus in here and we're going to have a little fun. David Perkins, for all the great things that he had in terms of attributes, he did not have common sense. And
No.
I don't know what possessed him to want to hit Brutus the way that he did.
So
Oh,
Urban yells out, Brutus is live. Like, live meaning he's a quarterback, you can hit him. But
it's a
understand
joke.
I get that. Understanding that he doesn't have any pads on and he's a mascot running around with a 4-foot wide head. And so Brutus pulls it down to scramble because he probably can't even see to throw the ball or his head's too wide to throw that thing. And Dave Perkins is in coverage and comes out of nowhere. And Josh, I'm going to tell you, there's a term that we have out there, folks. It's called CQ quality, clinic quality. This was a near leg, near shoulder form tackle on Brutus, where the first thing that hit was the back of that big nut he was wearing on his head.
Dude, Brutus was parallel to the ground before he hit. Like, I will give credit. That is a teach tape clip of how to tackle somebody. The shame of it all is it was a damn mascot that wasn't supposed to be tackled. Like, David Perkins, use your common sense.
That's what his defense, because he said he was live. I'm like, dude, he's not even wearing a helmet. He's got on a big, like, foam.
We should have a segment in one of these shows where we talk about David Perkins and Jamal Marcus.
Oh,
because
God.
I could tell stories about these guys for segments. David Perkins used to walk up to the line of scrimmage. You know, Coach Fick would be like, "Oh, you gotta bluff, you gotta bluff, you gotta make him think you're coming." This dude would walk up to the line of scrimmage and like pose like this, and then drop into coverage. We'd be in the film room. Coach Fick is like, "Hey, dummy, did you think like did you really think that they thought you were gonna blitz when you were standing up there like that?" And it was just ridiculous. Like these dudes were cartoons.
And what's amazing though is both of them were some of the most physically gifted humans I'd ever been around.
I wish I had some of what they had from a
Oh,
physical standpoint.
so explosive, so strong, great top end speed, but a lot of can't get right. I mean, trying like just can't get right. We're
We
trying to
used to
help
make
you.
Jamal stand up in the back of the meeting room because he would sleep every time coach would start getting into the scheme. He would fall asleep. And so Coach Fickle was like, "Don't even come in here and sit down. Just stand up. So at least I know you're not sleeping in here."
And it's one thing if you're like dozing off and you're doing things mostly right. I mean, he never did anything right. I mean, he was all
No,
over the
he
place.
didn't. He
But
didn't. Love him to
oh,
death. Well, he did one thing right because I think that his old lady now is a medical doctor. So he did one thing right in
he married someone that has a medical degree,
life.
chose
Yes.
to marry Jamal Marcus or Dave Perkins.
Jamal Marcus.
You gotta be kidding me. Like Perkins could at
Well,
least fake it in a conversation. I don't think Jamal that's I remember talking to Jamal Marcus and thinking like, man, I'm not sure
I
if he
think
graduated high
Jamal.
school.
I think Jamal has grown up a ton since we knew him. I really do, and it ended up working out to the point where now he's with the doctor.
That's fantastic. Kudos for him. He's got life figured out. Well, here's the bigger question, Joshua. Does Fox have it figured out with the spring game and how that's going to work for Ohio State? We'll break that down here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, we got the Buckeyes spring game coming up here in a few weeks. It's going to be April 13th. I believe it'll probably be around noon. That's when those things usually kick off. When I was going through Joshua, and I don't remember watching him under Jim Tressel, we used to do a full actual game, 4-quarter spring game, and that son of a gun would take like 3.5 hours and be
Sure,
awful.
absolutely.
Oh yeah, great. You never had to play in it. I was in those marathons, be raining, sometimes super hot. Like the weather was never just nice. It was either like scorching hot or my senior year that we played in it, I kept fighting with Fick to go back in because it was like 43 and rainy. And I'm like, if you're gonna make me stand out here, at least let me
I
play
need
so
to
I'm
be
not freaking.
moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You made me get warmed up. You made me go out here for 2 or 3 series for the dog and pony show. Screw the young guys. I'm gonna go play and have some fun. Like, let's stand over here and get rained on the side. So you get that whole swath. But it was announced that it's going to be on Fox. Now they've been on BTN here for the last couple of years. They've been, pretty pre-packaged into about a full 2-hour window, 2 traditional quarters, and then the second half running clock. Think the setup will be the same, but this is going to be the first spring game, Joshua, that will actually be on Fox here moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ryan Day is going to do it how he's done it in the past and wants to do it, and I think Fox is going to be happy to have it. I think it's awesome. It's going to give it a big feel. I know Joe Klatt said he's going to be up there in the booth. I absolutely love that. I love listening to him on games. It's going to feel big, but once you actually watch it, it's going to feel like a spring game ultimately. And so hopefully we'll get a little bit of maybe some extended time with some of the offensive weapons we would like to see more so than the defense. I think the defense is going to be super solid, and I don't know if those guys are going to need a ton of run in that situation. Now, I do want to push back against something that you said earlier. My first 2 years at Ohio State, and we took the 2013 one to Cincinnati, if my memory serves me
Oh
correctly.
yeah.
Urban used to run us now. He didn't like the first couple teams he had, and so he didn't treat us like the later teams, right? Because my junior year, my senior year, it was one of those where, hey, like, hey, telling the equipment guy, make sure you got a cap over there on the sideline for me when I take my helmet off, because I'm gonna be chilling. First couple years, man, we were getting after it.
Yeah, I forgot about that because I forgot they had the stadium renovations and you guys had to go that first season. The one other thing, I do think they'll get a lot of the defense out there or off the field early on. You'll get to see some of the young guys, which will be good. And heck, we haven't even got into the fact that, I think Sonny Styles has looked really good. And we'll get into some of this in tailgate talk. And his brother, too, I think is going to be an underrated piece of this defense. But we
Yeah.
have two true freshman quarterbacks that I think, Joshua, we're going to get a chance to see those guys a lot. And that might kind of whet the beak of everybody heading into this summer of what those guys could potentially be with Julian Sand and Aaron Nolan.
I think it's always good to get a look at the young guys and to try to project out where we think that they can be. One of the things that we do a little bit too much is like, oh, we got to get this guy on the field. Well, this guy's going to be an All-American. Calm down. Mike Thomas was an All-American like 2 times in the spring game. He played his freshman year a little bit and then had
But
the
he
redshirt
actually
the
then
sophomore year.
he manifested that talent into like a legit NFL and
Right,
career. It
but
took some time.
he teased us for 2 whole seasons, one of which the second season was a redshirt year. All right, so we just have to be patient with some of the things that we see. We can be excited, but we can be patient at the same time.
The best part, the Michael Thomas, that he got redshirted as a sophomore because he was was
Because
he
he was Mike Thomas.
he was
It was
Mike Thomas.
in that situation was really interesting too, because I think it was more personality based than it
Yes.
was talent based. Like Mike had to get right in some ways where if you saw him in 14 and 15, his maturity level was completely different than 12 and 13. And sometimes that happens for guys, but once it clicked for him where he's like, I got to do all of the things, that dude was on a rocket ship and he became really good. And we knew the talent was there, but that's what happens. Guys have to have it all click.
Well, and that's like I keep going back that Jeremiah Smith is the old version of Mike Thomas with speed because Mike could never really run all that well. And
No.
he's just a beast, but he was ultra competitive. And once he matured, you saw that. So I think we'll get a chance to see a lot of those young quarterbacks back and forth. You got to play someone. I mean, they've got 5 of them. So you're going to see those guys on the field. Probably with some of the younger receivers. I doubt they'll play JJ a ton, Smith, that is, because they'll probably let him go score a touchdown or two and then let it move on. But even regardless of what we see with those quarterbacks, remember how bad Justin Fields was in his first spring quarterback, where they had to like basically, I mean, it was like a structured big game hunt where I forget who the receiver was, where they put him on like a walk-on fourth team DB and double moved him to be
Right.
able to have him get 100 yards receiving, where like someone trots out like the deer for you to shoot and you're like standing 10 yards away. I mean, it had to be done so they could get some confidence with people going into the summer.
Yeah, I think and I might be mistaken with this too, but CJ Stroud's first spring game, I don't think was
Yeah,
necessarily like, it wasn't like we thought he was going to be a Heisman finalist and All-American quarterback. I think this environment's hard to thrive in ultimately for the sake of it's so controlled and you can't do all the things that necessarily make you a great player in that environment.
absolutely. All right, we'll get to that. We've got one more week of spring ball before we have the spring, well, I guess 2 weeks. Full week this week, next week, the 13th spring game. That'll be there and they'll be rocking. So we'll take a look at that. Now we got coming up next, we got our tailgate talk brought to you by Tipico, answering your questions next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Welcome back. And now we have Tailgate Talk. Tailgate Talk is brought to you by Tipico Sportsbook. They're going to change the way you bet with their new Tipico Rewards program. The more you bet, the more you can earn and win. And to celebrate this, Big Play is holding our own company-wide contest to see which of our shows can climb the leaderboard and prove that they are the best bettors at Big Play. The winning show may even give out some bet credits to their listeners each month. So be sure to follow along with all your Big Play personalities, Joshua and myself, Schlegs, on social media to lock in your bets with us all week long. Doing all right. We've got some college basketball coming up here. We're going to be the college football season, get some futures on it before you know it. There's all kinds of things out there. But remember, you must be 21 and older to gamble. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. First question we have with this. It just came in very recently from Dan. Dan, what do you make of neither Howard nor Sayin losing their black stripe yet? Update. Will Howard did lose his black stripe on Student Appreciation Day. So he got his peeled off, and I believe McLaughlin got his peeled off as well. So those guys are now officially part of the club.
Yeah, and maybe a little Hollywood behind that to do it on Student Appreciation Day in front of
Yeah.
the crowds of people that were there. I think, particularly for the quarterback room, that is a hell of a carrot to dangle out there when you have a competition is black stripe, black stripe, black stripe. And I think you want to get guys on the hook for as long as possible. So you're not tipping necessarily who has a big edge in that competition. Everybody's competitive. I think there's also a point where, you keep that black stripe on there too long, you might kill a little bit of confidence. What am I not doing right, coach? What can I do to get my stripe off? So there's a little bit of psychology that goes along with it. But I think a lot of this is just like traditional motivation. Like we need you to compete as hard as you can all the time.
Well, it's the indoctrination. It's the shared suffering. Like this is what allows you to be part of the group. Like there's a ceremonial process of you joining, and I think that that can't be underlooked. And I really think that that's a great tradition that they started. While was that while you were there, Joshua? Where they
Yes.
had that? Yeah. So it's not something that's been fairly old, but I do really like it, and it's always unique with transfers coming in, especially guys who have been starters and captains at other schools
Yep.
where you're not given anything. You have to also re-earn it. So there's a big difference between Will Howard getting it off and then like an Aaron Nolan or Julian Sayin, who those guys are fresh out of like high school and are early enrollees.
Yeah, and with the transfer guys too, especially guys who played a lot, like I don't think you can keep their stripe on entirely too long because then after a certain point, it does feel disrespectful. Like, brother, I am a conference champ, and I
Yeah.
don't know how many people around this building can necessarily say that.
Ooh,
So,
ooh.
it might be time for me to get the stripe off. Interesting story with that. I had my black stripe on until like the second week of the regular season my freshman year, and I came in the spring. Me and Urban, I've mentioned numerous times, did not get off on the right foot. We eventually got right. He's one of my favorite people, but yeah, black stripe was on entirely too long.
Yeah. And you know what? It felt good when it came off though. I mean, it's like,
We
you're
didn't
part of the
have
crew,
the pomp and circumstance during the season when I got mine off. He was like, "Hey, we're getting ready to put you on the punt team, so we're just going to take this thing off."
Well, if you're gonna play, you have to get like it has to happen. Like you
Yes.
can't put a dude on the field that still has the black stripe. So
Yeah.
I think it was out in the same we got to play Joshua on punt team, so you got to take his black stripe off. So we're gonna get that out of here. We got 2 weeks left. We've talked a little bit about this. But from Nick, what player are you most excited to see play in the spring game, or which player do you think has the most to prove? And I don't know if it's necessarily going to see a ton from them in the spring game because they're a guy that did transfer in, and then they also had a position change on my side. But just watching him over the last couple weeks and what I think he can do the last 2 weeks in the spring is we've talked so much about Sonny Styles and just for his physical gifts and talent, it's tremendous. But his brother Lorenzo's a couple years older than him, came in, played receiver at Notre Dame, and then transitioned to defensive back. And I thought in high school, it seemed like he would be a better DB than receiver. Wanted to obviously try it. Great. But he's been playing a lot of nickel and been playing really well, Joshua. And it's great because Jordan Hancock's there and he's very physically gifted, but that gives you the ability to maybe go four corners across the board. It gives you the ability that if you do have injury issues outside, you can slide Jordan Hancock outside, or maybe you have to move him back to safety should something happen because Lorenzo Styles, the older brother, looked really good in practice today. He's looked really good thus far. And I'm hoping he finishes the spring well because then if you're Tim Walton and Jim Knowles, you can sit there and you look at this whole group and Matt Gutierrez, all these guys, like, man, we've got like 8 or 9 dudes that can play in the secondary, safety, inside corner, outside corner, and kind of blend that together.
I love it for depth and quite frankly, like, you get into some of these teams where they like to air it out a little bit more. You want to be able to give a guy a break. Like, you're
Yeah.
playing a ton of reps. You need these guys to get their legs back under them so they're not shot by the end of the year. So I love it for that fact where you feel confident in your ability to rotate. I always thought Lorenzo was a really good athlete too, and you got to try to find ways to get those guys into a position where they can impact the game. And so I'm really excited to hear that he's progressing with that position change. A guy for me that I think has a lot to prove is CJ Hicks.
Yeah.
And we hear about him all the time, and we know what he is from an athletic standpoint. We saw a little bit of him in the bowl game, and I think he looked a little bit uncomfortable at times even a little bit stiff, which was surprising to me. And that can happen when you're thinking too much and you're not just playing the game. And for me, when I see him in the spring game, the thing that I want to see is a fluid guy who feels confident in what he's doing, right? Because if that starts to happen, now we're talking about, okay, where can we play him? Where do we put him? No, we like him in 3 linebacker looks. Is there an opportunity that we can get him some more reps and sub packages? Like, this is where I'm going with a guy like him. So a good spring, capped off with a good spring game, will do a lot for him.
What I also like with that is, he's played some Will, he's played some Sam, their three bagger sets. They've been kind of doing the same thing with him and Sonny Styles because they're very similar body types, big physical guys that can bend and run. I thought Sonny's been doing a really good job on the edge, like hand punch, things that linebacker skills that you need that you don't really use at secondary. He's done a good job with. And CJ Hicks has both played well too. And both of those guys hadn't been perfect, but they've been far more consistent than maybe I would have thought that they would have been, especially CJ. CJ's always been a flash guy because he's got really elite athleticism. And so he'll chase somebody down, he'll beat a block, he'll go do something, unique. But it's like, hey, then also, Joshua, it's like you also let him bend back in on you on a curl by number 2 and gave it up on 3rd and 8. Like, listen, we got to be aware. We got to slide back in. We've got to do the consistent things on a consistent basis. And he's doing that now. So, like I said, you're probably not going to see a ton from him in the spring either, in the spring game, but he's looked a lot better and doing some really good things. So very, very impressed with what they're able to do. Both of those guys, especially CJ. I think it's going to be a big year for him. All right, coming up, we're going to wrap up the program. Deion Sanders making some news about how he's going to handle his son and then maybe one of the best players in college football this year. We'll tell you what that is coming up here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Welcome back in the last segment of the program. Thanks for tuning in. As always, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe, like, leave comments. Any of the social media universe, we appreciate it on Bally's, obviously, as well. Deion Sanders made news again this week when he said that he was going to decide where his son was playing quarterback and then their talented corner/receiver, Travis Hunter, are going to get drafted in 2025, kind of referencing the Eli Manning situation when they didn't want him to go to San Diego to be part of the Chargers. Instead, Phillip Rivers went there. He goes to the New York Giants. Do you see this being a trend, and do you see him really leaning in on this, Josh?
No, if Caleb Williams cannot and will not do it, I don't think that it's going to become a trend. I don't want to take anything away from Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter. I think they're both phenomenal players. What you're not going to do is be a quarterback of a 4-win team and then tell me where you're getting ready to go. And you don't have that type of leverage. You don't have that type of pull. And like, we're not going to do that. And so like, I love the fact that we have a father out here who's advocating for his son and a player who he sees in the image of one of his sons, and wants what's best for them. That's also not how this world works. And especially if you're going to be a team that wins 4 or 5 or 6 games this year, no shot. No shot. And so I think we should just put this to rest. It's not going to happen.
I think he probably will try to lean in the best he can. Now, you better make sure that you're performing at a really high level. And like you said, Josh, if you're winning 10 games and like you're a CFP quality team and things are going good, then that might be a little bit of a different story, but you have to go out there and produce at a high level. And the other thing I know that the NFL, they don't really like getting bullied a whole lot. So, and I know Deion's got a lot of cachet. Obviously he's a Hall of Famer. He's great and everybody respects him a lot, but owners and GMs, like,
no one's bigger than the Shield.
No one is bigger than the Shield. Well, Joshua, thank you again. Wrapping up this Easter week. We got a couple weeks left of spring ball before the spring game. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Bobby Carpenter Show.